to about 5,500 workers in the industry. Then we distributed ration kits for 2.5 million meals to the
Hmm.
people who had lost job in the industry, their families.
Okay.
So lots of stuff. Yeah, I mean, we can keep going on that. Advocacy, just the word
Okay.
advocacy may be a very small word,
Hmm.
but we did a lot of work around that.
Got support from the government in terms of, at least listening here and maybe,
We got lots of audience. We got lots of audience. We were heard everywhere. A few things happened, but I wouldn't say that everything that we had asked for came our way. Some things are still work in progress.
okay. Okay, so he'll be playing a music video now.
Okay.
And
Has ruined
yeah, in
business
2
and
minutes
has
we'd
led
start.
to a job situation.
Seriously, ma'am, just don't know what to do.
Something must work out.
Collaborate. 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 Yes, sir. The way we'll do it. Let's learn to collaborate. Let's be the change and make the change. Liberate people, companies, employment your way. Let's collaborate. Let's collaborate. Let's collaborate. Let's collaborate. Alpha. He's a leader, big, bright, and fast. Beta. They support in every daunting task. Delta. They pitch and scout and warning and hunting. Omega. They look out for the next in line. We're running my company and building up my brand. Fix always getting squares. Stay focused on the task at hand. Now my jungle's open to the rules I want you. Opportunities to gain. Let's learn, grow, hunt, and play. I can work for dawn just as easily. Bow, but I do my work so professionally. Bow, I want work, but I want it my way. I'm a liberated associate on the techno highway. Let's learn the way wolves do it. Let's learn to collaborate. Let's be the change and make the change. Liberate people, companies, employment your way. Let's collaborate. 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 Let's collaborate.
Dominic, what are the companies that you've already impaneled onto your app so far?
There's Taj Goa, there's Radisson Blue, there are a couple of restaurants in Bombay, Ginger, Azure yourself, you're on it. Kabir, can we
Start. Sorry, go ahead.
this?
Yeah, please start.
Okay, you took me off guard there. Anyway, so good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 12th Collaborate Talk Show. We've got an esteemed panel, which I'll introduce shortly. And what is the Collaborate Talk Show? There is something called the gig economy that's hit India. I mean, it's been there for years, where people worked on a temp basis. We can't even call it a temp base, but a couple of hours per day. And you'd be familiar with the way the maids come to your homes. They are gig workers. They're part of the gig culture or the gig economy. And earlier, this was very unorganized. With the entry of Uber, Ola, Zomato, Swiggy, this gig economy has got organized, and even the urban company. So the government recently has announced that they are going to recognize gig workers. They have defined them. They have said they will come up with social security for them. And this, I believe, is going to be one more avenue for employment, both to provide it as well as to get it. So you can have a permanent job, you could have a contractual job, or you could work as a gig worker or hire gig workers. There is a lot of myths, there's a lot of misgivings around the gig economy and culture. People may be exploited, blah, 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 which well may be true. But the fact is, when we talk about the internet also, we can debate, for years to come, that whether the internet has brought about a good change or a bad change, whether it is a bad influence on the youth, etc. But the fact remains that it's here. So let's deal with it. Let's find out how to utilize it to get all of us ahead in a collaborative manner. And HTI has launched the Colaborate app, which brings together organizations and individuals to connect to each other directly. So we don't get involved, we connect them directly. They work out a deal and they could go ahead with the work. So with this in mind, to educate people on how they could collaborate, how they could become gig workers, how they could take advantage of the situation. And we started this series of Collaborate Talk Shows. So today on the panel with me is Anurag Katriar, President, National Restaurant Association of India, also Executive Director and CEO of deGustibus Hospitality. Anurag, or as his team fondly calls him, AK, has been pivotal in the growth and success of deGustibus Hospitality Private Limited. He joined the company in Jan 2004, when Indigo Colaba was the only operating restaurant within the company, to today, where he's the ED and CEO of one of India's fastest growing hospitality companies, with many popular brands under its wings. As a company, deGustibus has always stood for honesty, consistency, and profitability with strong fundamentals. AK's vision for deGustibus is to make it the most admired F&B company in India and to be one of the most successful Indian F&B companies on the global stage. He also aims to create value for every stakeholder, shareholders, employees. He considers his employees as his biggest asset and counts decades of loyalty by several dozens of his employees as his biggest achievement. Anurag is extremely result-oriented and is doubly enthused for the journey ahead. He continues to be excited about being in the food industry as he believes that eating out will never go out of style. Currently, Anurag also serves as the President of National Restaurant Association of India, the most visible representative body of independent restaurants in the country. Joining us on the panel is Kabir Suri, co-founder and director of Azure Hospitality, vice president and managing committee member of NRAI. Kabir holds a degree in economics and business management from Wheaton College, Massachusetts, USA. Under Azure Hospitality, he has developed and launched and is also managing brands like Mama Gudu Dhaba, established 1986, Sly Granny, Foxtrot, the Speedy Chow Roll Mal also. Kabir also serves as, like I told you, the vice president and managing committee member of NRAI. So we've got a very good panel today, and I'd like to start off with asking both of them one question each, and then we will take, as it flows. Audience, if you have a question ever, you can either type it out in the Q&A section that we have, or you would raise your hand and we would unmute you and you could directly pose your question to the panel, right? And those of you who are on Facebook, I don't know how you're going to put your question in, so maybe you'd like to join in through the regular route. That's the Zoom. Anyway. So, Anurag, hospitality took a huge blow during the pandemic, and I'm sure you also have, taken a real hit. What are the lessons learned and the changes made with regard to guest service policies, and how did it impact you in the HR side of things?
Thank you, Dominic, for having me here, first of all. And yeah, you are absolutely right. When it comes to the sectors which have been worst impacted by pandemic, I think hospitality is perhaps right at the top, along with probably tourism and a couple of aviation. We have been one of the worst sectors. Our problems get further accentuated because we are one of the largest employers of human capital in India. The restaurant industry provides direct employment to 7.3 million people. So, that brings in lots of people problem. Uh, we almost faced an existential crisis, to be honest, at the beginning of the pandemic when the lockdown just kept getting extended and there was no movement at all. And one of the biggest lessons that we learned from a financial perspective was that in our business model, the proportion of fixed operating expenses were very high. Now, what does that do to us? It makes us very, susceptible to any kind of revenue fluctuation. And in cases like pandemic, when the revenues were zero, survival becomes a very big issue. And we also realized that in our mad pursuit for growth, we all were in that cycle of growth. We were opening restaurants by the months. And what it does is that, there was lots of girth which had accumulated in our back end, in our offices, in our operations. So once the pandemic hit us and there was no business, we realized that this has to change, and that is perhaps one of the biggest learnings that we have. We need to either reduce our fixed operating expenses substantially or try and convert some of them into a variable expense. From an HR perspective, I think one of the first thing that I realized was that because labor is very easily available in India, we always had too many people on the shop floor, which actually resulted in the service expectations of the consumers being very high. I mean, if you're in a restaurant and you look around and you don't see a waiter in your vision, or you felt that the service was subpar. And when you travel overseas, there are two people who run a full restaurant. People wait for the chance. So I think this is one of the big corrections that's going to happen, because I'm very, very clear that anything which was relevant in the pre-pandemic times will have no relevance in the post-pandemic era. They're two different worlds altogether, and you can't compare the two. Now, what does it mean? We have all seen a shortfall in the revenues. We have all seen our businesses going down, businesses shutting down. So one way to survive is to bring down the cost, and cost essentially the fixed cost. And if you look at our business, other than the rental, the second biggest cost is people cost, and that needs to be probably looked into. I think from an HR perspective, the biggest lesson we have learned is that instead of having many hands, you rather have fewer hands who are better skilled. And another thing I must add here, Dominic, just as a last point,
Sure.
you have to understand our business is really a cyclic business. It's not identical business across the week or across the year. Different days of the week make a different numbers, and different months of the year mean very differently. But what you do is you always have people for the peak. That means you're carrying down the costs of these people through and through, which in today's world is not feasible. And I think that's one of the learnings, and that's where I think this whole gig economy is going to play a very eminent part in the F&B business going forward in the post-pandemic times.
So great. So I've got noted quite a few things that I'd like to take up with you as if, sequel questions, so to say. But I'll bring Kabir in over here. And Kabir, Azure also took a huge blow. I know about it. So what are the lessons you learned and changes made with directly regard to HR policies? I mean, Anurag, briefly mentioned that there were changes in policies, but what were the changes? If you could, not just with Azure, but across the board in the industry, what are the changes people took with regard to HR?
So, just first of all, thanks for having us on this show. I would like to obviously add to what Anurag has said. The damage or the tsunami hit everyone. It was not just one person. I think the entire industry, the entire world was hit. And like he rightfully said, we all have had to look at our fixed expenses specifically, labor and rentals. And within the labor section, coming to an HR perspective, we've realized, like he said, we are now able to work with less people and give the same output, right? So this is the biggest learning that we've seen, is that if a restaurant had 35 people working or 30 people working, we're currently today, as we stand, working with 50% of that. However, as revenues come back up, we are going to obviously bring the threshold up, but it will never go back to what it was pre-COVID, supporting what Anurag just said as well, that the new norm is not going to be the same norm, right? In respect to HR, you have to also understand human capital, people, people's lives were affected. So, from an HR perspective, we had to be rational in our thought process. We had to be, sensitive in our approach. We had zero revenue, but at the same time, we had very limited capital available also to support, the future of the company. So as a result, we had to work and collaborate with our team members and try and find ways where we could support them and their families when we ourselves had limited resources or revenues coming into the system. So I think, from an HR perspective, we collaborated amongst the team members and management to find solutions, because sometimes your own team members have the best solution, right? They will themselves say, so we don't need so many people, we can work with 5 people. And so they were finding solutions to the problems of how to reopen, how to re-engage, because so many people went back home, this, that, the other happened, right? So it was sensitivity and basically collaboration and working with the team members, which became a new norm within HR, right? It was not top-down sort of direction. It was more collaboration within team members. So everyone feels the pain together, right? We were all there in this sort of, this journey where none of us knew what was going to happen, but we were there for each other, right? And like Anurag said, we've had to take tough decisions, unfortunately, where we had to reduce sort of manpower and we had to put people on leave for a period of time. A lot of people obviously got stuck in their hometowns. A lot of people were fearful to come back. So we had to use compassion. I think one learning was compassion, how we could be compassionate with our members and walk through this journey of uncertainty. And further in an HR perspective, what we did was also we had to work on mental health. We had to provide some sort of direction and put the right people there where people could reach out, because people were breaking down, people were nervous, people were scared. So as a company, we had to provide some form of a sounding board, some sort of a room where people could talk and just take their fears out. So we've now instilled that within the system. So that openness of engagement is there, which we didn't have in the past. So that was one new element that came into play. And the second element, like I said, was fundamentally trying to find a solution to the problem together. I think that was the biggest learning through HR, because sometimes you get when you do things top down, you get reactions and it's not collaborative. But when you work together as a team, you find solutions and then the journey becomes easier to get out of. So these are the two big learnings for us, at least, besides obviously the structural changes that we had to do.
So now, while Kabir said, a lot about the collaborative approach and all, I just want to ask you all to briefly, discuss this point. There is a barrier between, let's say, the owners and the team on one side. And if I were to boil it down, there could be a pretty high element of distrust between both sides, right? Where the workers, especially if they have the typical worker mentality, would say like the owners have earned money, they got a lot of money, they're not willing to shell out, right? On the other side, you have the owners who, I work closely with them, so I know, like Anurag also pointed out about the rentals being so high. You have your statutory compliances, you have your salaries, which are your fixed costs. Whether you're doing zero revenue or not, that sunk cost has to be driven, right? So could you give me something that would help, let's say you have a lot of kids listening in to this. So to change that mindset, or, to get them to the owner perspective, like what do you guys go through every time a bill has to be paid, some unit has to be shut down, all the trauma. So some trauma, if you could share from your perspective. Anurag is
Anurag?
smiling and so
Anurag, you want to start?
Yeah, okay. No, in the first place, I don't necessarily agree to this concept of mistrust between employees and the employers or lack of communication. Yes, when you are, having operations across multiple cities, multiple locations, there could be a bit of, lacking of direct contact with them. But the communication happens through, the other people in the structure. I think the answer to your question on how do you beat that, I think communication has been one of the biggest keys to it. At the beginning of the pandemic, when things were really looking very uncertain, for example, I used to record video messages and send it to my, sorry, send it to my entire workforce. This could be very simple messages about, guys, save some money. You don't know how long is this going to last. Don't splurge. When the government allowed withdrawal of some provident fund money, I advise people do withdraw, but don't spend, stuff like that. I think end of the day, people, what flusters people is lack of communication. And if you have the communication going, I don't think it's a problem. Now, coming to the owner's mindset, very clearly, I think, in
I
certain
think I
sectors.
want also the owner's trauma.
Yeah, I'm coming to that. Yeah. So the owner's trauma is like that of a head of a family where suddenly the income has become zero and he has to feed so many mouths. In fact, one of the recurring themes of what I was talking to people, and we were talking as NRAI, was we need to ensure that everybody had food on their plate. Now, what do we go through? Understand, when the business is going on, there is a continuous cash flow. You may be making losses sometimes, but with the cash flow, you manage to make sure everything happens, on time. People are paid, stuff like that. You can play around with that. But when something like this happens, with every decision you make, the biggest trauma that one has to go through, your decision may impact thousands of families of the people who are working with you. And that's why, your decision making has to be much more what I call, thoughtful than others. Even the mode of communication, the language you use in communication, you have to understand, as an owner, you are sitting with a whole lot of responsibilities, whole lot of expenses, and no revenues coming in. How do you fund that? There are only two ways: either bring in your own money or get some funding done through financial institution. Now all these financial institutions, they don't lend you money when your business is dead. And that is one thing which lots of employees probably don't understand. Why can't we take a loan and pay them off? We all want to help you, but you have to understand, as owners, there are limitations that what business can do. I, as an individual, may have a different thought about how I should be looking at. One thing is what I want to do, and the second thing is what my business can afford to do. They're two very different things. I may want to do everything for my people, but whether I can afford it or not. And I think one lesson that I think every employee has learned now is that their own growth or their own welfare is directly linked to the welfare of the company. How the company is doing will reflect on how these guys are doing. And I think people have realized that over a period of time. The fact that nobody was shutting them, telling them go away now and will not pay you anything. People were doing whatever little they could do. I think that has in fact built a lot of confidence amongst the employees and employers.
So what you're saying is the trauma was like a father would go through when dealing with his family.
Yes.
The only thing here, your family is of 1,000+ members.
Yes.
Kabir,
You have no
would you like to
resources.
comment
You
on
don't know
that?
how you're going to provide food on the plate of your family. Now imagine that plight as an individual, and now multiply that with thousands of families. You realize how difficult it becomes.
Yes. Kabir.
I think, I completely support what Anurag is saying. I think the only fear, at least for us, and I think I speak for most of the restaurant industry, the fear for all of us was, besides survival, was how we were going to take care of our people. For us, this business is not made by just us. It is the people and the team members that make the brand, right? You can create a brand, but ultimately the brand has to be then executed, has to be consistent, there's a journey, right? And in that journey, every employee plays a part. So, we understand that, we value that, and we respect that. Any owner that does not respect that will never succeed in life, at least in the restaurant business, right? So I think you are dealing with people that are compassionate. You are dealing with people that understand the value of people. And in that value proposition, when you have zero revenue, your heart is torn because you don't know what to do. And like Anurag said, you try and access capital through institutions, you try and access capital through your resources, but ultimately there's a limit to what is available and there's a limit to what can be done. And I think most of us have tried our best during this period to provide whatever support we could have and can, and have, I think, fortunately come out of the problem. I think we've, it was survival, then revival, then growth. I think the fundamental goal of all of us was to survive as much as we could and make sure our people survive, in whichever way we could help them, in whichever way we could, extend this sort of journey. So I think, like I said, it is collaboration with our team members. It is work with them. And we have to fundamentally, the trauma, like I said, and Anurag has said, the trauma was real. It was not, that it doesn't affect the guys on the top. It affects everyone, and our trauma, I think, was a lot deeper because, like he said, you're dealing with 1,000 people plus. 1,000 people plus their families. So it's actually a lot more people.
True. And suppliers also.
And suppliers and vendors and, it was quite a journey.
Just to add a point to this, Dominic, when the pandemic broke out, one of the first things that we did in terms of what we wanted from the government as a support was to tell them, sir, please defer all our taxes and other payments so that we can utilize our limited resources to take care of our people. When I say our people, it's employees and lots of those small suppliers and everything. In fact, one of the demands which was later met by the government was that please allow our employees to withdraw money from the Provident Fund so that they don't worry about the food on their plates or the kitchen fires burning. And I think that is a very good example to support the point what Kabir was also making. We did whatever we could do, but there is only so much you can do under the circumstances like pandemic, which were totally unprecedented. We had no idea how to deal with it.
So now, I just wanted you all, to throw that light there. Now, I'm going to make you all move into a different role. Let's say you and Kabir, that is AK and Kabir, you guys are not owners of the brands you are with. You are, let's say, working in it, right? The pandemic strikes you. Let us presume you are experts in your field. You can choose whether you want to be a chef, you want to be a server, a manager, whatever. How would you tackle it if you did lose a job using the gig economy structure? So you're not getting a permanent job, let's say, and you now want to play around in the gig economy. What would your strategy be to get that done? Whether it is networking or, approach or whatever.
Should I start? Okay, go ahead, Kabir.
No, so Dominic, I think, for all the team members that are here on this webinar, I think, the F&B industry is the most tight knitted industry. If you're opening a restaurant and you need members to join from the kitchen or the service, the network is so strong that you help each other. A lot of people that have jobs or are looking for jobs talk to each other, right? So fundamentally, obviously, in this unprecedented current scenario, it's very different to the normal scenario, right? But in this unprecedented scenario, it's not like jobs are not available. Jobs are coming up. And yes, initially everything was put on hold. But as the economy is coming back and as the industry is recovering, and people are investing more capital into opening more restaurants and have now reopened their existing restaurants, people are looking for people to work and be part of the team. So I think, from a gig perspective, I think, if you're unable to find a permanent job, there's nothing wrong with that. I think fundamentally you should use this opportunity to have access to multiple jobs because you could potentially try your hands in various fields that you were not being able to prior, right? So for example, if you always worked your life in a kitchen, right? But you also want to experience the service side of it. You can still work in the kitchen 3 days a week, spend 2 days in a week working in service and get that exposure, and then decide which path you want to follow, right? So, a lot of people have said, I wish I could have learned how to work in the bar. I wish I could have worked in the kitchen. I am stuck in this one path within F&B. So I think you should also look at the gig economy to, especially for the freshers, to find the right footing on what makes sense for you. That's point one. Experience different sets within the F&B industry, kitchen, service, bar, various elements, right? Second thing is, then obviously, once you know the path that you want to follow, and once you're on that path, then if you're looking for increasing annual income or monthly income, the opportunity, it's like Uber, right? For the driving guys that drive Uber taxis or the Ola taxis, if you look at them, they're technically being able to work on 3-4 different platforms, right? So their annual income or their monthly income has been able to be multiplied, right? So similarly, the same fundamentals can be applied in F&B. So if you're not on a permanent job role, you are able to work multiple jobs. So you can do a lunch service with one company, do a dinner service with one company. You could do, you can structure it in different ways. Pay scales can be different depending on those companies' needs, right? So if you're being employed on the weekends and the pay scale on the weekend goes up versus the Monday, you can, so you need to learn how to be able to leverage your capability and leverage the opportunity. I think what happens is that, the fear of not having income, the fear of not having fixed income in many ways, you always want to stick to the fact that mere paas job hai, I've got a monthly income coming. I think that was the same fear for the taxi guys, if you think about it, right? The guys that were running cabs. Now, when you smell the blood and your annual income just doubles all of a sudden, or monthly income doubles, you are willing to put in the extra hours. You're willing to, so it's the same fundamentals, in my opinion.
So, Anurag, do you agree with Kabir where he says that, you could work in different portfolios, you can price yourself differently at different times of the day, and you get to experiment.
Yeah, I mean, understand one of the initiatives that NRAI had taken during the pandemic when the lockdown was fully in place was to actually work as an interface between lots of e-commerce companies and our employees.
Correct.
Those guys were looking for people, whether they were sorters, packers, delivery boys, whatever, and they were finding it difficult to service the increased demand because of the pandemic. And here we were sitting with people who were looking for jobs. And we were able to find jobs for thousands of people with this initiative. And these was a big e-commerce company, I think Big Basket, Spencer's, and a couple of other companies. See, look at the data. I mean, I'm just going to break away from just the words. Let's say we employed 7 million people. I'm sorry, before the pandemic. And let's say 25% of the restaurants have shut down. And others are working with reduced capacities, which means maybe about 40% of the workforce was not required. They had certainly become not redundant, but yeah, they were not required at that point of time. Now, 40% of 7 million is 3 million almost. Now, that is the kind number of people who are now suddenly available in the market. I think from an employee perspective who is facing the specter, is very important to understand what are their skill sets. I would advise anybody who is listening to this, please put your skills in 1, 2, and 3. I'm very good at cooking. I'm also good at maybe baking, and I can also be a bartender. And accordingly, use the gig economy to find jobs. Because when restaurants are working with lesser number of people, they do face the crunch of people during the peak hours or peak days or weekends and stuff like that. And there are jobs available. And they have to look, once they know where their skills are. I gave you skills which are very pertinent only to F&B. Some people may have general skills. Then you can actually be going around selling your skill or putting your skill to use profitably across sectors, if not within the restaurant only. Somebody is working, like Kabir was mentioning, somebody working for lunch at one place and dinner at one place. Yeah, it's possible. In an office area, a lunch will be very busy, whereas in a shopping area, dinner could be busier. You can be at 2 places. So end of the day, I think if I have to put it in a nutshell, you need to know where your skill sets are. You need to not have a singular skill. You need to find, multiple skills, and then look for the avenues within those skills and plan accordingly. It may actually be more profitable to be working like this than working on a fixed salary for a company.
Okay, so what I've heard you saying at the end is the most intriguing for me. And just for the audience, you can post your questions in the Q&A box. We'll be talking for another 8 minutes at least. And then I will start off with the Q&A. You could alternatively raise your hand at that point and ask your question. I can see some questions are already coming in. Back to Anurag and Kabir. Do you actually believe that, let's say, Dominic gets into the industry, okay, and don't look at it Dominic, I'm just putting it as a Dominic gets into the industry, could he actually earn more in a gig scenario than in a permanent scenario?
Potentially, yes, if you ask me. Potentially, yes. I'll give you an example, like even during the pre-pandemic times, let's say you're in a banquet business or a catering business, you wanted to hire 2 extra guys to work on tandoor on their off days, they'll probably be charging 2,000 rupees a day. And he's doing it on his off day. Now imagine if he has no job and if he can do it on 20 days of a year, of a month, that's 40,000, probably more than what an average tandooriya will earn as a salary. It is possible. And if you're working for longer hours and across multiple sectors and multiple jobs, it can actually be far more.
Kabir, because I heard you saying that the taxi drivers, they've tasted blood and found that this income had doubled.
Yeah, so it's the same thing as what he just said. It's the, for example, if a guy doing tandoori work and is on a 20 grand salary, based on the math that Anurag just shared, 2 grand into 20 days, you're already at 40 grand, right? So the point is, you see, you also have to have the drive. Yeah. You have to have the inner drive. If your inner drive is to make money, there are multiple ways of making money. If your inner drive is to create a career that is permanent in nature, that's a different drive. It depends on what your drive is. And everyone's requirement is different, right? So the point is, you have to merge the two. So you made the decision of being in the F&B business. That decision is made. That's why you're doing it. You're either doing it out of choice or you're doing it out of compulsion, right? So you made that decision again. If it's choice, you're in it for the career. If it's out of compulsion, you're in it for the money, right? And if it's out of compulsion for money, then there's a way of making more money. If it's for the choice of a career, then you have to path that career correctly. So the decisions are your own, right? But the facilitating that decision will be done through people like us, right? So we also have requirements. Today, we don't want to increase our fixed costs because we were disturbed for the last 1 year based on having no revenue, right? So as revenues increase, your manpower requirements will increase, your team member requirements will increase. When revenue is at zero, you don't need people to work. Now, what are you going to generate? So it's all interlinked, right? So the question is that, like Anurag has always said, and I support this, the F&B business ain't going anywhere, point one. People have to always eat, point two. This industry will always grow, point three. Brick and mortar or cloud kitchen, whatever it is, it's all consumption. Consumption ain't going anywhere. With 1.2 billion people in this country, we are going to see the brighter period of India going forward, okay? Whatever has to happen has happened. It could happen again. There's no denying that. But you have to be prepared. We are now in a better position to be prepared for tomorrow. We never assume zero revenue, right? But today, now, things can become zero. So now every decision making of us as owners or founders or operators or CEOs will be that what will happen if the business goes back again down to zero? How do we structure ourselves? How do we remain nimble? So in our thought process of being nimble, the gig economy also plays a part because ultimately the gig economy supports being nimble. I'm reducing my fixed costs. Coming back to what Anurag said, we are trying to figure out how to reduce our fixed costs. Labor is a fixed cost. So you have a certain base of fixed cost, but then the remaining can become variable.
Okay, for those listening in, when we talk about fixed costs, because some of you may not be aware, fixed costs is, for example, the rent that the owners pay for a property, whether they make do zero business, or they do 10 lakhs a month, they still have to pay that rent. The same way when they're paying staff salaries, the fixed employee salaries, that is fixed. Whether the shutter is opened or shutter is closed, the staff still take their salaries. And there are other loadings from the government in terms of what we call ESIC, PF, gratuity, the filings that have to be done, which are all burdens on the employer. on the employer. So during the pandemic, a thought process that went through a lot of owners' mind is how do we turn, to use Kabir's word, nimble, that is reduce the fixed costs. So they went to owners and said, can we work on a revenue share? That means the most sales we do, the more rental we pay you. And the same way, the industry is looking at how do they pay this employees in a manner in which the employee is not taken for a ride. That means he gets what he has worked for, but at the same time, he is not paid when he's not working. And that's what the gig economy is about. So if I'm required only on 1 day a week by an organization, they're happy to pay me maybe even 3 times what they would normally pay me per day. And just for your information, listeners, I also was in the gig economy space for about 12 years. I built my reputation through that and thus the company. Okay, and in between for 2 years, due to some other structural problems, infrastructural problems with the government, I was a one-man show and did many gigs at that time also. This was 2008, 2010. Anyway, now what I'm going to do, Kabir and Anurag, is open the floor out to questions. And we've already got some questions that have popped up. So I'll send them to you all one at a time. And we've got quite a few questions. So if we keep it crisp, would be nice. How do you move forward after making a wrong decision? Nice question.
Accept that you have made a mistake. Flush it down your away of your system and restart again. Anybody who makes a decision is the only one who can make good or bad decision, right or wrong decisions. There is no maths to that. Don't be scared of making decisions. If you make a wrong decision, you accept it, move on. It's a great learning. And I don't think people who don't make decisions and who are fence sitters go anywhere. People who succeed in life are the ones who make decisions. Good or bad is an outcome of what you have thought. You will learn if you made a wrong decision, but you must know when to move off the wrong decision and take the next decision.
Take corrective action. Kabir?
No, I agree with you. I think most of us, including myself, have made many decisions that were wrong. And those decisions have cost us a lot of money down the toilet. But the point is, if you don't, you have to learn from your decisions, right? Then at least the next decision will be a better decision. So, and if you remain in that thing that I made such a bad decision, now what's going to happen? You'll never move forward in life. So you have to take it part of life. We all make good decisions and bad decisions. It's a journey that we all have to go through. It's not just one person. It's all our journeys.
जो फैसले करते हैं वही सही या गलत फैसले करेंगे, remember that.
बस बिल्कुल सही.
बाकी और कुछ नहीं है. And whether your decisions are good or bad, right or wrong, always be proud of the decisions you make.
True.
Take ownership of it. Okay. Yeah. So now this might be a little bit sticky for you all. What are your thoughts on the government policy during COVID?
What policy?
Generally, whatever. This is a question that's been popped in. What are your thoughts on the government policy during COVID? So I suppose government's decision during COVID, government support to you all during COVID.
There are two ways to answer this, Dominic. One is we made lots of demands and requests with the government. If I have to judge purely on the outcome of that, maybe, we did not achieve the kind of results we were expecting. But you also have to think, when the pandemic was at peak, the primary effort of the government was to contain the pandemic and to make sure that the lives are secured before livelihoods are secured. So I would give a little bit of benefit of doubt to the government, but I think overall, the government of India did a commendable job. For our sector, we were expecting a lot more, especially when that 20 lakh crore package was coming out, and every day the media will tell us today is your number, and it never happened. So that was definitely very disappointing. But overall, I think both at the state levels and at the central government level, we got some support. We could have done with a lot more, but I don't think it's the end of the road. Lots of things are still work in progress.
Yeah.
Okay. Do owners have a fixed monthly income? And the person has asked for yes or no answer.
In today, the question is, do owners have a fixed income? Yes or no?
Monthly income. Yeah. Very specific monthly income.
It depends on the state of the business. I mean, there are some owners who are also CEOs. They may be drawing a salary. Yes, that is a fixed income, but that has disappeared the moment pandemic hit us.
Yeah.
But otherwise, as an owner, purely as an owner, no, it will depend on the health of your company and what you want to do. You may be earning 20 lakhs a month and you are deploying it towards capital, you have no earning then. So no, the answer to that is it's not a very simple question. If you are also working as an executive, then you may be earning some salaries, but no, otherwise owners don't have a fixed income.
Okay. Don't you think your data stroke marketing strategies would leak out if you have a mix of permanent and temporary staff?
I don't think so. I don't know. Kabir can answer that, but in my view, absolutely not. What is there to leak? Revenues are there in the public domain. I mean, you go to ROC website, I can tell you the turnover of Reliance to Domino's, everybody in a day's time. What's the big deal about it? There is no data which is leaked. I think, and if somebody is so brilliant that he could actually understand everything about your product and everything in a day's time, then I'm stupid not to hire him.
Yeah. Correct.
So what you're saying is the person who could hack your data would probably be somebody who would anyway hire as a gigger to monitor the data and advise you on it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I know there are lots of these questions which keeps coming in my internal open houses as well. No, you should see. No relationship can start on the premise of mistrust. You have to have your security features in place, but you can't start by saying, "Arey, ye ek din ke liye aaya, kuch chori karke jayega." No relationship can work like that, whether in personal or professional life.
Okay. As owners, do you think it's advisable to hire managers as giggers?
Who is answering? I think you need to point out now.
I'm just throwing it open. Kabir, take
I think that's the manager role as a gigger could be a potential problematic, in my opinion. However, it depends on the scale of the business and depends on the size of what you're trying to, as in the operation, right? So, because ultimately you need a leader that's permanent, that is running the ship. When it comes to actual sort of support staff and team members, that can come and go because so it depends. I don't know, Anurag, what your thought on that is, but I think it could be potentially.
No, I think for me, a manager is somebody who manages my resources and leads people as well.
Yeah, so it needs to be permanent.
He cannot be a gigger.
Yeah,
he cannot be a gigger.
Yeah,
to answer your question.
Yeah.
Okay. I find both of the sirs very well spoken. Thank you, Mr. Anurag and Mr. Kabir. That's not a question, it's more a compliment. And I'm also upset that they didn't compliment me anyway.
Thank you. You are doing very well, Dominic. I'm saying.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That was nice to hear. How long do you spend thinking about a decision before making the decision? I'll put it in a little perspective here, although it's a very open-ended question. Let's say because I've seen the list and it's mainly people who work for organizations or maybe are in the HR of organizations. Let's say you are faced with a situation where right now money is tight, or you are in a job with insecurity. You've got to take decisions with your family of 4 or 6 behind you. How long will you take a decision, let's say, to get into a gig job or get out of a permanent job, or how long will you spend looking for a permanent job?
I think it's a very relative question. Everybody will react differently to it. There are people who can make very quick decisions, and there are people who take longer time to make a decision. But once they make a decision, they stick to it. Okay. I don't think there is a right or a wrong answer to this. How long should you take is very relative to how you think.
So let's put it to you and Kabir. How long do you take to take decisions?
Depends on what decision am I taking. Yeah. If it is about opening a new restaurant, I may take maybe a month to just think. If it's about a new concept, could be 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if it is about whether I'm selling chicken tomorrow, it's this second. Yes, I am selling chicken tomorrow.
Okay, so I'm liking the questions coming up today because they're very sticky ones. Would you prefer to take a gigger who was or is working with a competitor to work at your restaurant? Now, technically speaking, you and Kabir are competitors, collaborators, whatever you all want to define yourself. I will, for this sake of the argument, call you all competitors. So would you all look at a gigger, working with, let's say, Anurag will hire a gigger who's worked with Kabir. Kabir, would you hire a gigger who's worked with Anurag?
If they're not permanent, on my roles, then they're open to go wherever, right? That's the whole premise, right? So, for example, if a gigger works at Anurag's for 2 days of the week and works with me for 2 days of the week, it doesn't bother us. But we have an underlining sort of understanding amongst us as business sort of operators, is that we will try and avoid pulling staff
Poaching.
from each other.
Poaching.
We would always try and reason through HR to make sure that staff is either left or is wanting to leave. We will not try and just take someone out.
I mean, to me, the question itself is fundamentally wrong. If somebody is a gigger, he will be working at multiple locations.
Exactly.
Whether it's a competition, potential competition or whatever, I mean, it makes no sense.
Right.
If I've decided to go with a gigger, it's for his skill and not for his background.
So actually, that's the reason why we have these talk shows, because people are still not familiar with the concept. Actually, a gigger will be working at all competitive organizations, sometimes maybe even next door to each other.
Yeah.
And why not think that he can also bring in some good practices of the competitors to your this thing, rather than thinking he will, he will be only taking out your good things to the other place. It works both ways, no?
Okay, so the next question is one that I would like to answer myself first before handing it over to you all. If we hire a waiter for a day or two during weekends, as per the requirements, don't you think it can be risky to directly allow them to serve the customers? They are not aware of the company's culture and policy. So like I said, I'd like to answer this first. See, one of the misconceptions about giggers is that, they work one day here and they will not come back to work with me maybe until 6 months later. A gig worker, you would probably hire him on a daily basis, a regular basis, if not daily. For example, the lady who cleans your home, the bai as we call them, is a gig worker. And I know in my home, she had her own key. She would come in when we are not there. She knew the policy in the house. She knew the culture. And yes, we had trained her for in certain aspects, the way we wanted it. So a gig worker, when he works in my restaurant as a waiter, would probably be trained first. And then we will tell him, okay, buddy, every time we need you, we're going to call out to you and you come over. The rate for the day, we will, it would be flexible, because if it's at a peak time like Christmas or New Year, you'd obviously have to pay more. If it's an off time, you'd pay less. Anyway, would Kabir or Anurag like to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, to me, a waiter is a very, as a word, maybe looking very simple, but there are waiters who play different roles. If somebody is not aware of my product and my menu and everything, I wouldn't like him to be having any conversation with my guest, customer facing. But there are so many other things they can do. They can do the misa, they can be the runners with the food from the kitchen to every table. They could be pouring water across the restaurant. They could be, wiping plates somewhere. There are roles that have to be assigned again. I'm coming back to the same word, depends on their skills. If somebody has worked with me for 2 years, he knows my menu by heart, and now he's a gigger, I wouldn't mind him going to my consumers. He will know. Okay. Or if somebody is working as a gigger for, let's say, he has already done 50 hours with me, and I know he's aware of my menu and product, I will not mind doing it. It will all depend on what skills he has.
Okay. Just for your information, Anurag, we will be having on the app itself the skill sets defined, and also you will be able to track how often the person has worked for you in our Collaborate app. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, including the rating that you have given him. So it works both ways, right? We are running out of time, and there are quite a few questions, but I'm going to give the benefit to anyone who would like to ask a question with open mic. So you could raise your hand and ask your question if you do have one. Would you all treat a permanent employee the same as a gigger on the same way as you would treat your permanent employees?
To be brutally honest, no.
No. What would the difference be?
Because with a permanent employee, it's not when you get into an employer-employee relationship over a long period of time, you develop an emotional connect with him, his family, and everything. Obviously, I look at him very differently than somebody who works with me 4 days in a month. So, I mean, that's a brutally honest answer, but I can give you politically correct one also, or anybody
No,
working on a devices.
I will go with the
right?
brutally honest one. I'll go. But on the flip side, could the permanent employee feel bad that you are actually paying the gig worker more per day or more per hour than you are paying him?
No, the way I would like to see this is very simple. For my permanent employees, these are the people who are here to assist them on the days when the volumes are much bigger. It's not about competition. They're two different things.
Okay.
Plus, I
Kabir,
think,
you
And I
plus,
think, sorry,
sorry,
Kabir, I'll just complete one point. And when you have lesser number of people on permanent roles, there is another unsaid benefit to them, which is the distribution of service tax and service charge and tips and all. They are far more than when they have a lot more people on the payroll.
correct.
Okay, so you're saying they would be happier with gig workers because then their service charges would be higher.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, one area that is I'm asking this question. Besides, we are talking about waiters or let's say captains. What about other roles like maybe a flair bartender on the weekends or a quality assurance person or a person who comes and does your alcohol audits only for an hour every evening? Would these be roles you could look at a gigger for? And how would that help you as an organization? How will it help the gigger individually?
I think for at least, let me answer that and then Anurag can answer it. I think, it depends on the role that those people are playing. It depends on the qualification. So for example, if it's an auditor, one will have to have some history on the experience of that auditor, right? Because I don't want a haywire sort of audit being done by someone who doesn't understand it, right? So the one will have to understand that person's details a lot more in depth. When it comes to a flair bartender or someone, I think that to me is something that would work. I think in addition to that, what the COVID scenario has taught us is basically amongst ourselves trying to collaborate as well as operators. So for example, if I require a maintenance team member, right? And I have a cluster and we're in a cluster market, which has multiple restaurants, right? I rather not hire that guy on my payroll. And I rather it be a gig guy who can manage basically all 3-4 restaurants over there, so that way he has 4 jobs to do, he or she. And in a way, all the actual sort of, again, your fixed expenses are getting shared.
Got it.
Yeah.
Anurag?
So I look at the things very clearly. Anybody who is on my permanent role, and if he does not have enough work for 9 hours, then it's a unnecessary expense you are incurring. To give you an example, F&B controller, like you said, who can come and do the audit of alcohol and he can spend 1 hour a day. Now to have that guy work for 9 hours on a permanent salary is a bad decision. But if I have 10 restaurants in the same neighborhood and this guy can do audits for all of them, then I'll rather have a permanent guy. So it will all depend. To me, fundamentally, if somebody in a role does not have enough work for the duration that he's hired for, then it's a bad decision. That's where giggers have to come in.
Okay. How will it help the gigger?
He can go and display his wares, sell his skills across multiple platforms, multiple places, without, nobody likes to be sitting idle in a workplace. If you have been hired, you are doing a 9 to 5 and you finish your work at 11, then 11 to 5 is probably the toughest part of the day for you. So he will rather be happier going around and working at other places and being gainfully employed than just sitting idle and twiddling his thumb.
Okay, so now a hypothetical question to both of you. Let's say, you hire me as your auditor and 1 hour a day I come to your place, right? After a point you say, okay, I've got 3 restaurants. I say, listen, I can't reach all 3 restaurants at 11 o'clock in the night and stay with you till 1 because it's not physically possible. But I have 2 other boys who I will be training. I will give them to you. They will do the audits for those 2 units. You will pay me and I will pay them. Okay. And then even when you open restaurants in outer Bombay, etc., I will locate somebody there. I will train that person and I will get your audits done. But for all these 3 people or more that you hire through me, you have to pay me. Would you be open to that sort of an enterprise?
Tactically speaking, I may or may not. Why may? Because then, I'm dealing with one person. May not, because then I'm putting all my eggs in a single basket. With a person who is not directly employed with me. So I rather deal with the giggers directly than
Yeah.
deal through another via media. That's
Okay.
my answer.
And
Yeah.
Kabir is also
No,
agreeing with you.
I support that. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got one question. How do students groom themselves for gig work, and how we can change their mindset towards gigging? How could a student?
Grooming is 101 of F&B, right? How do you groom yourself means you need to have.
I think she's talking. It's Lady Urvashi. I think she's talking about mentally grooming them or mentally preparing them to work in the gig space.
Start respecting your skills,
Yeah.
and then you will not feel bad about attuning your brains to being a gig worker. It's earlier there was this concept of I have a fixed job, I have a permanent job, and I have a security of that. Today the world has changed. While the gig worker may have some anxieties, but the opportunities that they have is equally exciting. It's about your mindset that, listen, I am not
Uh,
to another or one location to another. I am somebody who's respected for my skill. I possess a skill which I can actually share with multiple locations. It's nothing else. It's you have to change your mindset. I mean, if somebody was talking about an e-commerce 20 years back, we would have all laughed. Today, that's the reality of life.
True.
Things are changing. This is the new world.
So there's one more question on the same lines. I'm a college student. Can I work as a gigger, in brackets, like an untrained intern, in any of your restaurants? It's come in anonymous, so I don't know where the person is based also, and I can't.
Of course you can.
100%.
Yeah.
See, I'll tell you, when I look at people to hire, I don't even look at their CVs too much. I look at their attitude. People have to be hired for their attitude. Skills can be taught. Attitude cannot be.
Very true. So we'll bring this program to an end, and reminding all of you on listening in that this Collaborate Talk Show is brought to you by Colaborate, which is an app built to connect gig workers to companies. And you would put up your CV on one side, the company would put up the requirement on the other side, the system will match it, and you would get to know about a job in the area, a gig in the area. You will also bid for that day or that time period, and the company would make you an offer, could make you a counter offer. Both sides rate each other. So Collaborate app is here to sort of catalyze the gig economy. We are not going to be taking commissions on each hire. You could connect with the employer offline also once you have done your basic connections. Pick up the phone or WhatsApp each other, get your work done. It's just here to catalyze and re-energize the entire hospitality industry. So we are working a lot with collaborating, and that's a beautiful word, collaborate. We're collaborating a lot with owners. We're collaborating a lot with gig workers. One challenge that I keep finding very strange is that there are people who, like recently, there was someone, recently as in this afternoon, he writes to me saying he's been out of a job for 1 year. When I mentioned to him, get on the app and look for a temp job till you get one. He sounded very lukewarm about the whole idea, and this is not an anomaly. I mean, I'm finding this very regular, where people are just out looking, with blinkers, so to say. I want a fixed job. I want a permanent job. I want a permanent job. Man, if there's no permanent job, go out there. Keep your skill set is being used. You when you're out there, opportunity will come your way. Let's say you take up a job with Anurag or with Kabir. His team is bound to see that, okay, this guy is serious about his work. He's good at his work. At some point when they need a fixed employer, and you are happy to work now as a fixed employer, they will take you on, right? So don't just sit at home. Anurag and Kabir, I know their story also during the lockdown. Me, myself, we are running a training company. Everything shut down. Everything shut down. But do you think we were sitting down doing nothing at that time? No, we are planning, we are moving, we are doing something. Because so that when the situation changes, you're not at back. You're in the front of the line. You're making the changes that have to happen. And yes, like Anurag and Kabir also mentioned, you can take decisions that go wrong. No problem. Own up to it, admit it, learn from it, move on. Right? So Collaborate is here to help you collaborate with owners. Owners, Collaborate is here to help you collaborate with gig workers. We'll get the industry back up. Last words from Anurag and from Kabir before we sign out. So Anurag and Kabir, been great having you guys on the show. This particular program I found extremely serious, extremely to the point. with everything. So we laughed a little less, but I like the fact that there were so many questions that came up. We've still not been able to answer them. Your signing out comments: gig economy, gig culture, hospitality.
So let me start on that. I think it's a beautiful platform that you guys have thought about, and it is something which is for the future. When a gig economy allows you to work at your own convenience, at your own times, you're not bound by. If you have a Christmas, you can decide to stay home if you don't want to work. When you're on a permanent job, that may not be possible. You have an anniversary, you can decide to stay home. There is nothing wrong with it. These were the thoughts of yesteryears, that permanency is very important and that stability is very important. Who says stability only comes if you have a single paycheck coming in a month? It can also happen with 20 paychecks coming in a month. It's about enjoying your job. And if you get to do what you love doing over multiple platforms, I think you should consider yourself very lucky. Please do not hesitate from being a participant in the gig economy if you're confident about your own skills and your own attitude. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks, Anurag.
I would, yeah.
Kabir, go ahead.
I would just basically request everyone that is on this webinar to, if you're self-driven, if you are able to make decisions for yourself, you should not restrict yourself from engaging in the gig economy. If you're out of a job, if you're looking for new work, if you're tired of what you're doing, but you want to try something else, you should engage in this manner, because it gives you the opportunity to try new things. It gives you the opportunity to learn new things, and it gives you the opportunity to see things and then make decisions, right? And like Anurag said, it gives you the opportunity to also maximize your time basis your own desire, your own flexibility, because that permanent sort of job does not give you flexibility. You're bound by the rules and regulations of a company and their HR policies. When you are on your own, you're flexible to decide when you want to do what and how do you want to do it, besides the limited times that you've committed already for that service period. But beyond that, it's your sort of time, right? So, I support what Anurag just said, and I would like to thank Dominic for giving us the, this opportunity to speak to your, the people that are on this webinar. And like I said, we are more than happy to help wherever we can. Our office doors, our HR doors are always open when we are looking, if we have, availability. So, do reach out to the NRAI members in respect to restaurant chains that are on there. And, hopefully we all come out of this stronger.
For sure. Coming out stronger is the ultimate goal. And so the NRAI and Collaborate, we look forward to working together and getting this whole thing kick-started all over again and coming out bigger, faster, stronger. And we'll get all the foreign funding also into India, Kabir and Anurag, so that, because India is the place to be, is what I've always been saying. So thanks a lot for being on the show, guys, and God bless. Keep rocking.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.